Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Sung Jin-Woo, the unyielding, suddenly enters the Tokyo Ghoul universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The air hits him first. Not mana, not hostility in the way he understands it, but something denser, heavier, soaked into the streets themselves. Tokyo at night breathes like a living organism. Neon lights pulsing over concrete veins, crowds moving with forced normalcy, every smile stretched just a little too tight. Jin-Woo stands still on a quiet side street, coat unmoving despite the wind, shadow pooling unnaturally at his feet. His senses reach outward and stop short, not because they fail, but because there is nothing structured to grasp. No gates, no systems, no dungeon walls. And yet everywhere he looks, hunger leaks through the cracks. It clings to alleyways, rides the subway air, lingers behind glass windows where people laugh too loudly. This world hides its monsters inside itself. A scream cuts through the night 2 blocks away, sharp and brief. Jin-Woo turns, not in alarm, but in confirmation. He moves without urgency, footsteps silent as he enters a narrow alley where bodies already lie cooling on the pavement. Blood streaks the walls in careless arcs, fresh, human. At the far end, something crouches over its meal, its shape wrong in ways no disguise can fully mask. When it senses him, it doesn't flee. It lunges. The impact never comes. Jin-Woo's hand closes around its throat mid-motion, fingers sinking into flesh that resists more than it should, muscles packed tight with predatory strength. The creature thrashes, Kagoon tearing free in a violent bloom of red, but Jin-Woo doesn't step back. He watches, studies. This isn't corruption. This isn't possession. It's a rule of the world, a species built to feed and vanish. With a single precise motion, he ends it. The body collapses, lifeless, and something else catches his attention. When its soul disperses, it leaves nothing behind. No echo, no claim. Sirens approach in the distance. Jin-Woo straightens, eyes lifting toward the skyline where towers loom like watchful sentinels. Armed humans will come next, not to hunt him, but to clean up what they think they understand. He steps back into the shadows, not retreating, just repositioning, letting the city reveal itself on its own terms. From rooftops and underground tunnels, from crowded districts and forgotten wards, killing intent flickers into existence and fades again, scattered, uncoordinated, constant. This is not a battlefield. It's a feeding ground pretending to be civilization. Jin-Woo's shadow stretches longer as he walks, merging with Tokyo's darkness, and for the first time since arriving, he makes a decision that has nothing to do with survival. He will not pass through this world. He will remain, because a city like this does not need a hunter. It needs an end to the hunger that never sleeps. The neon glow reflects off wet asphalt as Jin-Woo moves with effortless precision, each step measured but carrying an unspoken weight. He senses them now, the hidden predators that slip among the unsuspecting humans, their ghoulish nature cloaked in everyday appearances. A young man with pale skin and sharp eyes brushes past a street vendor, fingers twitching with a barely restrained hunger. Across the street, a woman with a hooded coat stops to look at a passing taxi, her Kagoon curling subtly behind her, invisible unless you knew what to watch for. Jin-Woo does. Not because he wants to, but because his presence in this world forces awareness. He is a singular anomaly, a force without precedent, and everything that moves under the veil of Tokyo's night now registers as a potential variable in a system he has yet to understand. He doesn't strike. Not yet. First, he observes. Shadows flicker along alley walls, stretching unnaturally as he summons small tendrils of his own army, creatures of darkness, obedient and silent. They slip behind corners, into subway grates, their presence unnoticed, collecting data, marking patterns. Jin-Woo watches the city like a strategist surveying a chessboard, noting clusters of danger, concentrations of hunger, and pathways humans unknowingly traverse. Every ghoul here has its territory. Every investigator has routines. None of them anticipate what is about to arrive. None realize that their rules, their hierarchies, their fragile sense of order are now variables under the thumb of something far beyond their comprehension. From a nearby alley, a low growl echoes, signaling an SS-rated ghoul has caught wind of an intrusion. Its body twists unnaturally, cocoon extending in jagged crimson arcs, a creature sculpted for carnage. The streets themselves seem to hold their breath as Jin-Woo steps forward, shadow soldiers rising silently from beneath the asphalt, their forms barely perceptible in the dim light. The ghoul launches, speed beyond ordinary perception. Claws aim to rend, cocoon striking with lethal intent. But Jin-Woo doesn't move in anticipation. Instead, he lets the attack reach him, absorbing the momentum with a single controlled motion, redirecting it into the shadows at his command. The ghoul is lifted, slammed into a wall, and for the first time in its existence, it registers failure. Its predatory certainty, its instinctual dominance, shatters in an instant. By the time the SS-rated predator recovers, Jin-Woo has closed the distance, shadows enveloping the creature, restraining it as if it were nothing more than a toy. With a precise strike, the ghoul's heart is punctured, and it collapses into the darkness, leaving no scream, no echo, no warning. The city resumes its indifferent rhythm, unaware that one of its apex predators has just been removed without leaving a trace. Jin-Woo doesn't linger. He moves deeper into the network of streets and alleys, each step calculated, each shadow he summons a silent sentinel. He is not hunting for sport, nor for dominance. He is cataloging, analyzing, restructuring the battlefield in his mind. As he progresses, the faint smell of blood mixes with the metallic tang of the city itself. He passes a small park where a child cries over a dropped toy, oblivious to the world of predators surrounding her. Across the street, a ghoul pauses mid-hunt, sensing the shift in the air, a subtle change that even the most experienced among them cannot explain. Jin-Woo allows the child's cry to fade into the night. He does not intervene unless absolutely necessary. Observation is a priority. Control comes second. In this city, survival is instinct. For him, dominance is inevitable. Rooftops become his vantage points. Intersections become grids of intelligence. Every shadow, every movement, every fleeting intention is tracked, recorded, and analyzed by creatures that are extensions of his will. By the time the CCG teams finally converge on a nearby crime scene, they find nothing. The ghouls are gone, victims unharmed, evidence erased. Yet the investigators feel it, a weight, an unnatural certainty that something in Tokyo watches them now, something that does not belong. Jin-Woo does not need to fight them. Their fear is already shaping the battlefield. Even in this unfamiliar world, he adapts effortlessly. The rhythm of Tokyo, the ebb and flow of human and ghoul alike, becomes another layer of his dominion. Shadows twist, merge, and retreat at his silent command, carving invisible lines through the city's veins. Every ghoul eliminated, every predator subdued, every human life untouched by mistake strengthens the invisible web he spins across Tokyo. By the time dawn threatens to pierce the neon haze, Jin-Woo stands at the heart of a city that remains ignorant of the quiet war that has just begun. A war where the rules are no longer determined by ghouls or humans, but by the one being who bends darkness to his will. This is only the beginning. Sung Jin-Woo is here not as an observer, but as a force rewriting the very rules of existence. The streets, alleys, and skyscrapers are no longer just structures. They are pawns, pieces in a game that the world has no idea is already lost. The subtle hum of life continues, yet beneath it, a pulse of inevitability spreads. Predators, hunters, and humans alike will soon realize that Tokyo is no longer theirs to govern. One being has stepped in, unseen, unstoppable, and the city has just become his first playground. The city is waking, but not as it should. Morning fog mingles with exhaust fumes and neon residue, blurring the edges of Tokyo into a ghostly battlefield. Jin-Woo moves with quiet precision, shadows coiling at his feet like liquid darkness, expanding and contracting as he flows through the urban maze. Every alleyway he passes, every rooftop he crosses, registers as a tactical point in a city built on fear and hunger. Ghouls, sensing the shift in the air, hesitate, flicking their cocoon cautiously, uncertain who or what has entered their world. They are predators, but their instincts cannot map the singular anomaly before them. Each hesitation, each misstep is catalogued, stored, and used to anticipate the next move. To Jin-Woo, this world is unfamiliar, yes, but it bends quickly to his will. A shrill alarm echoes from a nearby district, CCG units responding to reports of unusual activity. Jin-Woo pauses just long enough to study them. Investigators swarm through streets, flashlights cutting through the morning haze, armed with quinqués designed to pierce flesh infused with ghoul power. They move with training, with instinct, but there is a hesitancy now, a flicker of doubt because the city itself feels different under his gaze. Shadows slip past their vision, objects disappear and reappear with no explanation, and for the first time, they feel their environment as a threat rather than a tool. Jin-Woo does not strike. He merely allows the subtle pressure of his presence to shift the battlefield. The units scatter slightly, misreading each other's movements, their cohesion fracturing without a single blow landing. In a side street, an Aogiri tree ghoul, the type known for cruelty and cunning, steps into what it believes is an advantageous position. It lunges at a human caught in its territory, but the movement is too predictable, too rooted in instinct. Shadows emerge from the cracks in the asphalt, tendrils wrapping around limbs and restricting motion with an unyielding grip. Jin-Woo approaches silently, his expression calm, observing as the predator struggles against his dark creations. There is no panic, no hesitation in him, only measured execution. With a single gesture, the ghoul is lifted, thrown against a wall, and incapacitated. The kaguni retracts, twitching in its last moments, and the ghoul collapses, leaving behind only a whisper of life. This is not just power, it is methodical restructuring of the predator hierarchy. Every action is a lesson to this world. Predators learn, often too late, that dominance is no longer defined by strength alone. Jin-Woo reshapes the ecosystem with surgical precision, eliminating the apex threats while leaving lower-tier predators confused and fragmented. Ghouls begin to sense the presence of a being unlike any they have encountered, a hunter who does not hunt for survival, for hunger, or for chaos, but for order. He becomes an unseen authority, a force that enforces rules without explanation. This subtle restructuring spreads outward like a ripple, causing factions within the ghoul community to reconsider alliances, reposition territories, and question loyalties. None can see him directly, none can anticipate his next move, yet all are influenced by his shadow. In a narrow courtyard, a human investigator from a recent operation stumbles across the remains of a ghoul that had terrorized the area for months. The scene is immaculate. There is no carnage, no mess, no evidence of struggle beyond the lifeless body. The investigator studies the surroundings, senses something off, but cannot articulate it. It is a subtle psychological pressure, one that Jin-Woo exploits relentlessly. From the rooftops, from behind walls, from the darkest corners of alleys, his shadows move in constant, silent reconnaissance. He watches patterns of movement, evaluates threats, and anticipates the next points of conflict. The city becomes a living map in his mind, each heartbeat, each breath, each step noted and categorized. As he moves deeper into the urban sprawl, a cluster of SS-rated ghouls gathers in a derelict warehouse, drawn by rumors of an intruder. They are the kind that command fear and obedience within their own ranks, predators of the predators. Jin-Woo observes them without hesitation, calculating the optimal approach. He does not rush, does not rely on brute force alone. Shadows coalesce behind him, stretching into elongated forms, each a phantom soldier capable of subduing multiple adversaries simultaneously. The ghouls sense him finally, a disturbance in the natural order they cannot explain. Their initial confidence falters as their instincts scream danger, yet they cannot perceive the true magnitude of the threat. When he finally strikes, it is both instantaneous and devastating. The shadows envelop the ghouls, binding them with impossible speed and precision, turning their own attacks against them in a ballet of annihilation. Within moments, their reign over the warehouse is shattered. Across Tokyo, the ripples of his actions begin to alter the fabric of the city. Areas that were once dominated by fear and dominance now experience a strange equilibrium, a cautious silence where predators and prey alike pause to reconsider the rules they have followed for so long. Jin-Woo does not celebrate, does not linger. He moves from one point to another, a constant presence that cannot be fully detected, yet whose effects are undeniable. Each encounter, each eliminated threat strengthens the web of control he spins invisibly through the city. By the time the sun reaches the skyline, Jin-Woo has traversed multiple districts, observed countless interactions, and subtly rewritten the rules of engagement in Tokyo. This is the essence of his approach, swift, silent, and methodical. He does not seek recognition. He does not seek gratitude. His purpose is singular, to impose order in a world built on fear and predation. By the end of the morning, Tokyo's hunters, its predators, and its unwitting citizens are all unknowingly adapting to the presence of a force far greater than any they have ever encountered. The city is his to study, his to manipulate, and ultimately, his to govern. Sung Jin-Woo does not simply exist here. He reshapes the very definition of survival, leaving nothing untouched, leaving nothing predictable, and leaving a world forever changed by the quiet, inexorable dominance of the Shadow Monarch. As the day stretches on, the city's rhythm begins to bend subtly under Jin-Woo's silent command. He moves through Tokyo with a predator's grace, yet there is no haste, no recklessness. Every step calculated, every shadow summoned, a precise instrument of control. From the highest rooftops to the narrowest alleyways, his tendrils of darkness creep along surfaces, slipping between walls and floorboards, flowing through the veins of the city itself. Ghouls that once prowled with arrogance now hesitate, their instincts screaming at them that something utterly foreign, utterly dominant, has entered their domain. They cannot see him directly, yet every nerve, every movement, every subtle flicker of thought is influenced by his presence. Even seasoned SS-rated predators begin to second-guess themselves, unsure whether the world around them has shifted or if it is merely their own perception faltering. In an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a group of Aogiri Tree operatives gather, confident in their strength, confident that Tokyo belongs to those who wield true predatory power. Jin-Woo observes them from above, his eyes scanning each face, each movement, analyzing the latent potential for violence and the subtle fractures in their formation. He does not engage immediately. Instead, he studies, calculates, and positions his shadows like pieces on a chessboard. When the time comes, his attack is instantaneous. Shadows erupt from beneath the floor, tendrils wrapping around limbs, constricting, immobilizing, and disarming simultaneously. The ghouls fight with everything they have, Kaguni lashing and claws tearing at the darkness, but every effort is anticipated, every countermove neutralized before it can manifest. Within moments, the strongest among them falls, their limbs pinned, their strength nullified. Jin-Woo steps forward, silent and composed, delivering the final unerring strike that ends their reign over this territory. Across the city, the effects of his actions ripple outward. Investigators arriving at scenes of conflict find empty warehouses, silent streets, and no trace of the ghouls that terrorized the area only hours before. They sense the aftermath, the disruption, the shift in power, but cannot comprehend its source. Panic and confusion ripple through their ranks as plans crumble and assumptions fail. Jin-Woo's dominance is evident, yet unseen, a force that reshapes the ecosystem of Tokyo without exposing itself directly. In this world where survival depended on fear and predation, the balance has been recalibrated. Predators hesitate, humans unconsciously tread more cautiously, and the city itself seems to pulse with a new, unnerving rhythm. Even as he eliminates threats, Jin-Woo adapts, raising shadows from the fallen ghouls, creatures that retain fragments of their cocoon and fighting instincts, now fully under his command. They act as both scouts and enforcers, extending his presence into areas he cannot occupy physically. The network of shadows moves silently through the streets, alleys, and rooftops, observing, tracking, and ensuring that no predator or human can act without leaving a trace. In this way, he constructs an invisible dominion, a web of influence that spreads quietly yet inexorably through the city. By midday, Tokyo had already begun to respond to his presence. Ghouls avoid territories where his shadows linger, and the remaining Aogiri factions retreat to regroup, cautious and wary in a city they no longer understand. The CCG receives scattered reports of sudden eradications, bodies gone without a trace, and districts left unnervingly quiet after moments of chaos. Confusion spreads like wildfire. Jin-Woo does not engage the investigators directly. He allows them to observe, to sense, and to fear, reinforcing the psychological domination of the city. Every reaction, every adjustment, every misstep by the ghouls and humans alike further cements his control. As the sun dips toward the horizon, Jin-Woo surveys the city from a vantage point atop one of Tokyo's tallest towers. The streets below carry on as if nothing has changed, yet beneath the surface, a subtle order has begun to take shape. Predators have been subdued, territories restructured, and the balance of power irrevocably altered. He does not smile, does not boast, and does not linger. His work is precise, calculated, and complete for this cycle. Tokyo is no longer just a city of humans and ghouls. It is a city under observation, a city where every shadow could conceal judgment, and every movement is accounted for by a force they cannot comprehend. In the fading light, a sense of inevitability settles over the metropolis. Predators, hunters, and innocents alike are all part of a system they cannot yet perceive, yet all are impacted by it. Jin-Woo does not need to fight further today. His presence alone has reshaped the hierarchy of the city, and the consequences will unfold naturally, irrevocably. Tokyo has been silently claimed not through tyranny, but through methodical, unseen dominance. The Shadow Monarch has arrived, and the world of flesh and hunger is now a landscape over which he silently rules. Every shadow a sentinel, every step a declaration, every action a permanent rewrite of the rules they once lived by. This is only the beginning. Sung Jin-Woo has entered a world of predators, and even the strongest among them will soon realize that the rules have changed. The city is his chessboard, the ghouls are his pieces, and every life, predator or human, will either adapt or be removed. The night approaches, and with it, a quiet certainty. Tokyo will never be the same again. Before we jump into the chaos about to unfold, take a moment and think about this. If a being who commands shadows and death itself suddenly appeared in your city, how would you react? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because what you're about to witness will push the limits of what even the strongest hunters can comprehend. The first traces of Jin-Woo's presence in Tokyo have already begun to ripple through the city. But now the world of organized human hunters, the CCG, is starting to notice that something is not just different, but unprecedented. They arrive in small teams at crime scenes that once seemed like ordinary ghoul activity, only to find perfection in eradication, a strange silence, and not a single trace of struggle beyond what could be expected in a battlefield. The anomalies multiply quickly, and soon the patterns become impossible to ignore. Reports flood in about missing ghouls, empty districts, and sudden disappearances that defy conventional logic. The CCG analysts begin to whisper about an unknown variable, a potential threat whose power eclipses even the most dangerous ghouls. The first tactical team is dispatched to investigate a district previously dominated by a high-ranking SS-rated ghoul. They move cautiously, weapons in hand, Kaneki gleaming in the early morning light. Their formation is tight, drills drilled into muscle memory, every member alert for ambush. But as they enter the narrow streets, the usual cues of danger are absent. No sounds of struggle, no faint glimmer of blood, no signs of predation. The investigators exchange wary glances, instinct screaming that something is wrong, yet their training keeps them moving forward. Shadows lengthen unnaturally at their periphery, corners of the city that should be empty, subtly quivering as if alive. Jin-Woo observes silently from the rooftops, calculating, letting the team move exactly where he wants them, and allowing the first taste of psychological warfare to take hold. He does not attack. His presence alone begins to rewrite the rules of engagement. As the team investigates, the air grows tense. Street lamps flicker and gutters overflow with shadows that were never there before. The investigators' Kanekis begin to vibrate subtly, sensing a spiritual signature that is not consistent with any ghoul they have ever encountered. Every trained sense honed through countless hunts screams a warning that cannot be articulated. The tension escalates when a high-ranking investigator approaches what should have been the epicenter of ghoul activity. The street is empty, silent, perfectly arranged, as though nothing had ever happened. Then, without warning, the shadows shift violently, coiling into forms too fast to track. Kaneki clash against thin air, strikes miss nothing, and a presence heavier than instinct settles over the street. The first instinct is disbelief, followed quickly by the creeping realization that they are dealing with something beyond the capacity of any known classification. Jin-Woo finally manifests from the darkness, not as a foe to be engaged, but as a force to be acknowledged. His appearance is calm, composed, the shadow armor moving subtly with him, and the air around him almost solid with authority. The investigators freeze, not from fear of death, but from the incomprehensible certainty that this being does not operate within the rules they know. He does not attack, yet every muscle in the team tightens, every movement calculated yet hesitant. Even the most seasoned SS-ranked investigators can feel the magnitude of the anomaly. They have faced ghouls capable of destroying entire teams, monsters that terrify entire cities, but this presence is different. It is not about strength alone. It is a combination of absolute control, invisibility, and the inevitability of consequence. Questions begin to ripple through their minds. Is this a ghoul? Impossible. Is this a human? Even less likely. The spiritual signature does not match any known baseline. Their fear is compounded by confusion, and confusion is the perfect soil for fear to grow. Jin-Woo studies them, noting their ranks, their weapons, their probable attack patterns, and the subtle hesitation in their formation. He does not speak. He does not need to. Fear, when properly constructed, communicates without words. The CCG team senses their own inadequacy before a single shadow is deployed. The air is thick with anticipation, but the action has not even begun. A low growl escapes from an alley behind them, a ghoul emboldened by the perceived human weakness. It lunges, and the reaction is instantaneous. Shadows erupt from Jin-Woo, fluid and precise, snaking through streets, catching the creature mid-flight, pinning it against walls, and severing its cocoon before it can react. The team witnesses the act, horrified. The ghoul is eliminated with surgical precision, leaving no trace, no struggle, no question about what happened. And yet they are frozen not in relief, but in the dawning awareness that they are powerless to stop it. The fear is now fully seated. It will not fade. Every action, every death, every silent observation reinforces the realization that a new apex predator has arrived, one that is beyond classification, beyond negotiation, beyond understanding. As the investigators regroup, they notice that the streets around them have subtly shifted. The debris from previous conflicts has been cleared, the blood washed away, the ghoul activity erased without a trace. Every alleyway they turn down, every street they examine echoes the same pattern: elimination without struggle, domination without contact, and a presence that is always watching. Jin-Woo retreats to higher vantage points, letting them gather data, letting them feel their own limitations. He does not need to fight them to demonstrate superiority. He only needs to exist in their perception. Fear is now a living thing in Tokyo, a tangible weight that begins to distort decisions, fracture formations, and set the stage for the changes he will impose on the city. With every passing moment, the CCG realizes that the rules they trained under, the strategies they perfected over years of combating ghouls, are suddenly insufficient. Teams that once moved with perfect coordination stumble over instinctual caution. Communication falters as every investigator subconsciously anticipates an invisible opponent. Jin-Woo's presence transforms the city into a testing ground where humans themselves are pawns, where fear is a weapon deployed without a single strike, and where the idea of safety has begun to erode. From the shadows above, he surveys the chaos of the mind rather than the chaos of battle. His plan is not to destroy indiscriminately, but to establish a psychological hierarchy, a new apex that even the strongest hunters cannot challenge directly, a force that must be feared before it is confronted. The sun climbs higher in the sky, but the shadows do not diminish. Jin-Woo moves silently between rooftops, weaving through Tokyo with the precision of a predator and the patience of a strategist. Every investigative team, every isolated ghoul, every ordinary human unknowingly witnessing fragments of his movement begins to recalibrate behavior. The city is already bending to his will, not through overt domination, but through the birth of a pervasive, unseen terror. This is the beginning of the CCG's confrontation, and already the seed of fear has taken root so deeply that it will influence every decision, every action, and every thought of every hunter in the field. The realization is inescapable. The CCG is not facing a ghoul, not facing a monster they can analyze, categorize, or eliminate. They are facing a force that defines new rules, a predator that does not need to fight to win, and a presence that transforms fear into an invisible chain. Jin-Woo's first contact has already reshaped the psychological landscape of the city. He is not struck at the heart of the CCG physically, but the mental battlefield has been claimed in full. Every unit, every investigator, every analyst will now operate under the looming shadow of the Shadow Monarch. And no preparation, no training, no history of ghouls or quinques can undo what has already begun. The city quivers beneath the surface, and the first whispers of fear travel through the ranks. They speak of an unknown entity, a power without precedent, and the impossibility of confronting it. Jin-Woo remains unseen, untouchable, and utterly in control. The birth of fear has begun, not with screams or chaos, but with observation, inevitability, and absolute authority. Every movement he makes reinforces that fear, and every shadow he commands is a reminder. Tokyo now belongs to the unknown. The CCG's first encounter with the Shadow Monarch has ended before it even began, and the consequences will echo through every district, every headquarters, and every mind for days to come. The CCG teams pull back, shaken and disoriented, their minds racing to reconcile what they have just witnessed with everything they know about ghouls and hunters. Senior investigators exchange hurried whispers, trying to rationalize the impossible, but each explanation collapses under the weight of evidence they cannot touch. Jin-Woo does not pursue them. There is no need. The seed of fear has already taken root, and it grows faster than any physical assault ever could. From his vantage point above, he observes the ripple effect. Communication is strained, formations falter, and minor disputes erupt between investigators who once moved with unshakable cohesion. Subconsciously, every team member recalculates risk, doubts their own instincts, and begins to act more cautiously than ever before. This is power expressed not through brute force, but through perception, Across the city, intelligence reports begin to accumulate. Sudden disappearances of ghouls, bodies found perfectly intact yet lifeless, and witnesses reporting fleeting glimpses of shadows that move with impossible speed. Analysts attempt to cross-reference the incidents, seeking patterns that fit the historical data, but none exists. Each event is a variable without precedent, a fracture in the carefully constructed understanding of the world. The higher-ups at the CCG begin to whisper about a potential anomaly, an entity that cannot be classified within the existing framework of ghoul threats. Murmurs of SS beyond imagination circulate quietly, feeding an undercurrent of unease that spreads faster than any public announcement could. Jin-Woo is not actively hunting the investigators, yet he dominates the battlefield entirely through presence and psychological manipulation. Meanwhile, individual investigators begin to notice subtle inconsistencies in their surroundings. A street they pass regularly seems different, corners slightly altered, shadows stretching in ways that defy natural logic. The streets themselves become instruments of observation, reporting data to an invisible hand. Every misstep, every hesitation, every minor instinctual action is noted and catalogued by Jin-Woo's shadows. They are extensions of his perception, moving like liquid over rooftops and through alleys, silently recording patterns, behaviors, and weaknesses. By the time a team regroups, Jin-Woo's influence has already propagated through multiple districts, and the first tangible evidence of his strategic dominance begins to emerge. Ghouls that once acted with confidence are now cautious, avoiding streets and areas where his presence has been felt, while humans move subtly more carefully, aware on some level of an invisible predator. In one particularly tense encounter, a squad of CCG investigators approaches a reported ghoul nest. They are met with silence. No sound of feeding, no struggle, no remnants of conflict. The only clue is a faint shifting in the shadows along the periphery of the building. As they enter the courtyard, a low, almost imperceptible movement in the darkness catches their eyes. Before they can react, shadows erupt, snaking across the ground, immobilizing the ghouls in a dance of precision strikes and calculated restraint. Every SS-ranked ghoul within the compound is neutralized simultaneously, not through chaotic combat but through surgical execution orchestrated by Jin-Woo. The investigators are left frozen, witnessing the elimination without the ability to intervene. Their perceptions of control shattered. Fear settles in their bones, not for their lives alone, but for the incomprehensible scale of the power that has entered their world. Reports of these encounters flood the central command of the CCG, creating an unprecedented atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. The higher command realizes that the anomaly is not just powerful, it operates outside the known parameters of both human and ghoul combat. The term unknown SSS-class entity is cautiously whispered in strategy meetings, each syllable carrying the weight of dread. This is a threat that cannot be quantified, categorized, or confronted with conventional force. Every deployment, every plan, every training drill must now account for the unpredictable movements and silent dominance of an entity whose presence alone has redefined the rules of engagement in Tokyo. As the day progresses, Jin-Woo's influence spreads further. Smaller groups of ghouls avoid his territories. Investigators second-guess each other's decisions, and the city itself becomes a subtle but tangible reflection of his presence. Shadows stretch and writhe along walls, unnoticed by ordinary eyes, but instrumental in cataloging every movement, every decision, every reaction. Jin-Woo observes quietly, letting the fear compound, allowing the hunters to internalize the lesson before he ever needs to act directly. He does not raise his hand, does not strike with visible force, and yet the psychological domination is complete. Every human, every ghoul, every observer capable of sensing the anomaly now carries the imprint of his existence. The first official encounter between Sung Jin-Woo and the CCG has ended not with carnage, but with the establishment of a new order in perception. Fear has been born, and it grows unchecked. Teams operate under the looming weight of an unknown predator whose strategies cannot be predicted, whose presence cannot be challenged directly. The city, once a chaotic dance of humans and ghouls, now moves to the rhythm of a single silent observer, the Shadow Monarch, who has arrived and already rewritten the rules without firing a single shot. Every plan, every deployment, every decision henceforth is filtered through the lens of his existence. Jin-Woo's first contact is not a battle. It is a demonstration of dominance so profound that the CCG itself begins to restructure its understanding of threat, power, and survival in Tokyo. The tension within the CCG spreads like wildfire. Investigators no longer move with their usual confidence. Hesitation seeps into every decision. Teams second-guess formations that were once flawless, communication falters, and the seasoned hunters begin to feel the creeping weight of an invisible authority pressing down on every street and alley. Even the strongest SS-ranked investigators, trained to face ghouls that can destroy entire squads, find themselves unsettled. Their instincts scream that something beyond comprehension is observing them, adapting to their every move and anticipating outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. Every plan they attempt begins to feel fragile, their confidence eroding under the intangible pressure that Jin-Woo exerts without ever directly engaging. Meanwhile, ghouls across Tokyo begin to sense the shift in dominance. High-ranking predators pause mid-hunt, their predatory instincts confused and frustrated. Territories once marked and enforced with unchallenged authority are suddenly unsafe, and even the boldest among them hesitate. Jin-Woo's shadows move silently through the city, extending his reach, recording movements, and restraining threats before they can escalate. These creatures, raised from eliminated ghouls and bound to his will, act as extensions of his perception, simultaneously tracking patterns, anticipating aggression, and subtly influencing behavior across districts. Predators who once ruled with confidence now operate under uncertainty, and their hesitation amplifies the psychological dominance Jin-Woo has already established. A high-ranking CCG team moves into a district that had previously been a hub of ghoul activity. The streets are eerily quiet, unnaturally so, as if the city itself has taken a deep, cautious breath. The investigators fan out, scanning for the slightest irregularity, every shadow, every movement under scrutiny. Without warning, a group of mid-tier ghouls emerges from a hidden alley, sensing an opportunity to strike humans distracted by the unusual silence. Jin-Woo observes from above, calculating, and then allows a single shadow to flicker into action. The ghouls are immobilized in an instant. Their attacks stopped mid-motion, cocoons severed or pinned before they can connect. The human investigators witness the elimination, a combination of awe and terror flooding their senses. They have seen ghouls killed before, but never with such precision, never with a force that seems to control every variable simultaneously. Fear solidifies further, the seed planted earlier taking root deeper in the minds of every operative. As the day progresses, Jin-Woo continues his silent campaign, moving fluidly across the ready, never striking directly at humans unless absolutely necessary, yet leaving a trail of order, restraint, and disruption in his wake. SS-rated ghouls that once inspired terror now retreat at the faintest hint of his shadow. Their instincts no longer reliable guides. Even mid-tier predators begin avoiding areas where his influence is felt. The city itself transforms subtly under his presence. Streets, rooftops, alleys all become part of a silent grid through which Jin-Woo's will flows. Every movement of humans or ghouls within this grid is recorded and reacted to with imperceptible adjustments of his shadows. He is omnipresent without being seen, untouchable without confrontation, and his power manifests in the structure of the city and the behavior of its inhabitants. Investigators at the CCG headquarters begin to analyze the reports, piecing together fragments of incidents across Tokyo. Each report reinforces the notion that they are facing something unprecedented. SS-rated ghouls eliminated in moments, territories cleared without trace, and investigative teams left shaken despite having faced countless dangerous ghouls before. The senior staff convene, strategizing, theorizing. But every approach falters against the reality of an unknown entity whose presence redefines risk, threat, and engagement. Jin-Woo's influence has already forced them to operate with new caution, to anticipate a foe that can strike without being seen, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that their previous experience is insufficient for what has arrived. By late afternoon, Jin-Woo's web of control covers multiple districts simultaneously. Shadow scouts extend through alleys, rooftops, and hidden passages, maintaining constant surveillance, cataloging every threat, and subtly restraining aggression where it might compromise his overarching plan. The psychological effect is cumulative. Investigators who encounter even the faintest sign of his activity react more cautiously, second-guessing their instincts and altering their movements. Ghouls in the vicinity act erratically, their confidence fractured. Even ordinary humans sense an unspoken tension in the air, an unseen authority shaping their environment. Jin-Woo has not engaged in a single mass battle with the CCG directly, yet he dominates the city's narrative completely. The sun begins to lower, casting long shadows across Tokyo. Yet the city itself seems alive in response to his influence. Jin-Woo observes from a high vantage point, calculating next moves, analyzing reactions, and allowing the fear he has planted to grow unchecked. Every team, every investigator, every ghoulish predator now exists in a reality altered by the presence of a being they cannot comprehend or confront. Fear is no longer a mere reaction. It has become a tool, a weapon, and a controlling force, shaping the actions of the strongest hunters in Tokyo. As night approaches, reports continue to stream in, each adding to the growing realization that this is not an ordinary threat. The CCG operates under a new paradigm, one dictated by the silent, inexorable presence of Sung Jin-Woo. He has not yet revealed the full extent of his power, and yet the city already moves in deference to him. The birth of fear is complete. A single entity has imposed dominance without traditional combat, restructuring both predator and hunter behavior and establishing a psychological hierarchy that ensures obedience, caution, and recognition of his inevitability. By the time darkness fully falls, every operative in Tokyo is operating under the shadow of the Shadow Monarch, fully aware that the rules of engagement they trained under are obsolete, and that survival now depends on recognition, caution, and the unseen hand of a predator unlike any they have faced before. The city settles into an uneasy rhythm as night falls, the neon lights flickering against rain-slicked streets, and every alley and rooftop now carries a sense of foreboding. The CCG, despite its most experienced operatives being deployed, is already reacting to an invisible hand guiding the outcomes of encounters. Teams that once moved with precision and certainty now hesitate, scanning shadows with heightened paranoia, sensing but not fully seeing the force that has claimed dominion over their city. Jin-Woo does not actively pursue them. He does not need to. Each movement, each strategic placement of his shadows, each subtle manipulation of the environment reinforces the narrative of his invincibility. Fear has become tangible, woven into the very fabric of the city, and the hunters are powerless to resist its influence. In one district, a squadron of SS-ranked investigators converges on a location where reports indicated ghoul activity earlier in the day. They enter cautiously, quinkes at the ready, expecting confrontation. What they encounter instead is silence, an eerie stillness that immediately triggers instinctual unease. Shadows writhe along walls just outside the limits of perception, responding to their movements, subtly constraining choices without physical contact. The squadron falters, coordination beginning to crack, as each member senses the anomaly before them is not a ghoul, not human, not something they can analyze. They attempt to regroup, but the cumulative effect of hesitation, fear, and uncertainty slows every decision. Jin-Woo watches from above, assessing, calculating, adjusting, and the outcome is already determined without him ever needing to land a single blow. Meanwhile, scattered ghouls across Tokyo begin to encounter remnants of his influence. Some are eliminated preemptively by shadows or dispatched with precision strikes that leave no trace of struggle. Others flee instinctively, sensing their dominion shrinking under the quiet, methodical surveillance of a predator that does not announce its presence. Even within Aogiri tree ranks, fear spreads. SS-level ghouls pause mid-hunt, questioning the safety of their territory, while mid-tier predators falter, unsure whether to engage or retreat. The city itself bends subtly to Jin-Woo's will. Movement, perception, even instinct is quietly manipulated to establish a hierarchy of fear, where humans and ghouls alike instinctively defer to the invisible apex predator. From the vantage of the rooftops, Jin-Woo observes human investigators responding to multiple crises simultaneously. Panic, confusion, and instinctual caution ripple through each team. Kaneki are raised preemptively, eyes darting to every shadow, yet the true threat remains unseen. Communication becomes fragmented as each operative reacts to perceived danger, unaware that their actions are anticipated, catalogued, and manipulated. Jin-Woo has converted fear into a weapon more efficient than any quinkwe or kagune. Psychological dominance, the subtle destabilization of coordination, and the anticipation of every conceivable response have already reshaped the operational capacity of the CCG. The birth of fear, he understands, is far more dangerous than direct confrontation because it forces enemies to act under constraint long before the first strike lands. By the time the city reaches late evening, Jin-Woo has traversed several districts in silence, leaving an invisible web of influence in his wake. Reports of unexplained ghoul eliminations, empty battlefields, and frozen investigators continue to reach headquarters, compounding uncertainty and reinforcing dread. Even the most confident investigators are forced to recalibrate, abandoning previous tactics and considering contingencies for an enemy whose abilities cannot be measured. Every district affected becomes a lesson for the CCG, each moment of hesitation a sign of dominance exerted without violence. Jin-Woo's approach is methodical. He dismantles confidence and instills caution before ever needing to strike again, and in doing so he establishes a level of control previously unseen in the Tokyo Ghoul universe. In one final encounter before the night deepens, a team of investigators encounters a small group of mid-tier ghouls attempting to ambush a human civilian. The ghouls are confident, but confidence has become a liability. Shadows erupt from unexpected corners, tendrils immobilizing attackers before they can even react. The investigators watch, stunned, as the ghouls are neutralized in a display of precision that blends invisibility and control. Not a single human is harmed, yet the impact on the squad is profound. Their training and instincts no longer offer security. The very rules they relied upon have been rewritten by the presence of a force that defies classification. As the city settles into a tentative night, Jin-Woo perches silently on a skyscraper, surveying Tokyo with an almost clinical detachment. Fear has been seeded in every operative who has crossed paths with him. Ghouls have begun to avoid territories once considered safe. Even ordinary humans sense an intangible shift, subtle changes in the rhythm of the city that hint at an unseen authority. The CCG now operates under a new paradigm, one defined by anticipation, restraint, and the unspoken knowledge that any misstep could be observed and exploited by a predator they cannot understand. Jin-Woo has not simply fought, he has imposed psychological dominion, establishing himself as an apex presence without deploying the full breadth of his abilities. This first direct engagement with the CCG has demonstrated a new principle. Fear, when properly engineered, is a weapon far more effective than brute strength. By the end of the night, investigators across Tokyo carry the imprint of his existence in their minds. They are aware that they face an entity whose reach, perception, and control surpass anything they have trained for. Sung Jin-Woo has not merely entered a new world. He has altered its structure, rewritten its rules, and established a hierarchy where the humans, ghouls, and even the most powerful predators must reckon with a force that exists beyond classification. The city quivers beneath his influence, and every action from this point forward will be shaped by the presence of the Shadow Monarch. Fear has been born, and it will grow until every shadow in Tokyo answers to him. Before we dive into this next chapter, imagine the moment when the strongest human-ghoul hybrid in Tokyo encounters a force that defies every law he knows. Drop a comment telling me what you think Kaneki's first impression of Sung Jin-Woo would be, because what happens here will change the balance of the city forever. The streets are quiet now, the tension thick enough to feel physically pressing. The neon signs flicker, reflecting off puddles on the asphalt, painting the world in harsh reds and blues. Kaneki Ken moves cautiously, senses on high alert, having been tipped off by whispers of an unprecedented force moving through the city. His Kagoon is coiled, ready to strike, every muscle primed for battle. But this is not a hunt like any other he has faced. The air itself feels dense with an invisible weight, a pressure that pinches at his instincts, forcing him to pause and recalibrate. Kaneki enters an abandoned industrial district, a maze of warehouses and steel beams, the perfect place for predators to stalk prey. He stops mid-step, feeling a presence that is alien yet overwhelming. Shadows ripple unnaturally along the walls, moving with a sentience that is unmistakably not his own. His eyes narrow, focusing on the subtle shifts in the darkness. He senses a pattern, a precision in the movements of the shadows that cannot be explained by ghouls alone. Jin-Woo waits, perched atop a rusted water tower, barely visible, his coat shifting with the subtle wind, shadows pooling around him like living ink. There is no hostility in his posture, no haste, but the sheer inevitability of his presence presses down on Kaneki. For the first time in a long time, Kaneki feels something beyond fear. He feels the weight of absolute dominance. Kaneki approaches cautiously, taking stock of the environment. Every instinct he has honed through years of survival screams for him to attack, to test the limits of this new presence. Yet the rational part of his mind warns that this is no ordinary enemy. The air vibrates with latent energy, the kind that predates even the strongest of SS-class ghouls. He flexes his fingers, Kagoon ready, and steps into the open, fully aware that the entity he is about to confront will not respond like any opponent he has faced before. Shadows begin to twist and writhe subtly around Jin-Woo, responding to Kaneki's movements, almost as if they are studying him, testing him, measuring his potential. The weight of it presses on Kaneki's senses, and yet a spark of curiosity ignites. He has faced monsters, seen death, and survived horrors that would break most minds. This, he realizes, is a predator unlike any he has known. Jin-Woo finally steps down from the tower, shadows coiling beneath him like serpents awaiting command. His eyes lock onto Kaneki's, calm, unyielding, yet carrying an undeniable authority. Kaneki feels the pull of instinct against logic. He senses the overwhelming power, the impossibility of fully understanding what he faces, yet he refuses to retreat. Instead, he takes a step forward, testing the waters, allowing his Kagoon to extend, the crimson tendrils shifting and responding to his own intent. Jin-Woo does not flinch. He does not raise his hand. The shadows around him stretch subtly, observing, reacting, and calculating every potential move Kaneki could make. There is no hostility yet, but the tension is palpable. Every heartbeat echoes, every breath carries weight, and every step is a test. Kaneki decides to probe, striking first with a swift lunge designed to test strength and reaction speed. His Kagoon lashes forward, a fluid crimson wave of intent and lethal precision. Jin-Woo remains still, letting the attack approach. The shadows beneath him respond instinctively, twisting, splitting, and meeting the strike mid-air with a precision that is almost surgical. Kaneki's Kaguni hits an invisible force, halted abruptly, and he feels a resistance unlike anything he has ever encountered. He recoils slightly, eyes widening as the realization hits. This is not merely power. This is control over the battlefield itself. Jin-Woo steps forward, slowly, deliberately, shadows extending outward to map every possible movement Kaneki could attempt next. The young hybrid realizes that this fight, if it comes, will not be measured in brute strength alone. Strategy, anticipation, and survival will matter. And for the first time, he is confronted with a predator who anticipates instinct itself. A small, low growl escapes from Kaneki, his body tensing as he recalibrates. He has fought monsters that could tear the world apart in a blink, but this presence forces him to question everything. Every move he considers is anticipated before it can manifest. Jin-Woo's shadow soldiers remain in the periphery, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present, prepared to react to any aggression. Kaneki begins to test limits again, small flicks of his kaguna, probing the shadows, looking for weakness, looking for a crack in control. The shadows respond instantly, adjusting, countering, restraining potential actions before they materialize. A tense standoff unfolds, not with chaos or destruction, but with a silent, electrifying recognition of power. Kaneki knows that he is facing not an opponent in the conventional sense, but a force that defines new parameters of combat dominance and survival. Both combatants pause, evaluating, testing, and measuring. Kaneki senses the gap between raw power and the ability to control reality itself, and it unnerves him. Every instinct honed over years of suffering and battle struggles to comprehend what it means to face a predator who can manipulate shadows with absolute precision and think multiple steps ahead instinctively. Jin-Woo's presence alone reshapes the environment, turning every alleyway, every rooftop, every shadow into part of his domain. Kaneki realizes fully that this is not merely a fight. It is a confrontation with the apex predator of a system that he does not yet understand. The tension escalates without a single blow being struck, a psychological chess match between two entities at the peak of instinct and intellect. Kaneki's eyes narrow as he searches for the strategy to overcome a foe who anticipates every instinctive reaction. He feels the shadow soldiers, senses their movements, and for the first time experiences genuine uncertainty about whether he can survive this encounter. Jin-Woo watches, silent and composed, letting the tension build, letting fear sharpen Kaneki's awareness without breaking him, knowing that the next moment could define the power dynamics of the entire city. This is the point where Tokyo itself seems to hold its breath. The predator and the hybrid stand in silent opposition, not attacking yet, fully aware of the stakes. The city becomes the arena, every shadow a potential weapon, every movement a variable in a game that neither Kaneki nor anyone else in Tokyo has ever faced before. The King of Shadows has arrived, and Kaneki is the first to truly confront the reality of a force beyond comprehension. A predator that does not merely hunt, but commands fear, anticipation, and absolute control over the battlefield itself. Kaneki's breathing becomes measured, controlled, yet the tension in his body is undeniable. Every instinct screams to attack, to test strength, to assert dominance, but the subtle awareness of Jin-Woo's shadows forces him to reconsider. He is accustomed to relying on reflex, on the raw power of his kaguna, on the ability to react faster than any predator in the world. Yet here, that instinct is rendered almost useless. Every flicker of movement is anticipated, every angle of attack countered before it can manifest. He realizes that this is not merely a physical confrontation. It is a battle of perception, of anticipation, and of control over the environment itself. The young hybrid takes a slow step forward, gauging not only Jin-Woo's reaction, but the responses of the shadows that seem to exist with minds of their own, extensions of a force that refuses to be challenged directly. The air between them thickens, charged with unspoken authority. Kaneki tests again, small, precise jabs of his kagune, probing for weakness, looking for even a sliver of imperfection in the Shadow Monarch's control. Each attack is met with fluid, near-impossible adjustments by Jin-Woo's shadows, moving faster than thought, seamless and precise. It is a dance of strategy rather than brute force. Kaneki notices patterns, subtle but consistent, in the way the shadows move, retract, and counteract. He senses a rhythm, an intelligence that observes, learns, and adapts instantaneously. It dawns on him that he is facing an opponent not defined by raw power or rage, but by meticulous calculation, anticipation, and a mastery of spatial dominance that even he struggles to counter. Kaneki's mind races, analyzing, planning, recalibrating every potential response. He recognizes immediately that a direct confrontation would be fatal, not because Jin-Woo's strength is unmatched, it is, but because the Shadow Monarch manipulates the battlefield itself. Every shadow, every angle, every space is under observation and control. Kaneki tries to exploit subtle variables, minor distractions, even environmental anomalies. Yet each maneuver is anticipated and neutralized with perfect precision. The tension escalates as the realization sinks in. He is not facing an ordinary predator. He is facing a being whose power is systemic, omnipresent, and nearly omniscient in its execution. For the first time, Kaneki feels the weight of true vulnerability. He has survived torture, confronted entire organizations, and faced monsters that terrify the world. But the presence of Sung Jin-Woo introduces a concept beyond survival. The inevitability of being outmaneuvered before the fight even begins. The psychological pressure builds as he senses the subtle manipulation of his instincts, the constant surveillance, and the impossibility of finding a blind spot. Jin-Woo does not strike, does not provoke, yet every movement Kaneki makes is under silent assessment. Fear, respect, and an almost primal awe mix in his chest, forcing him to rethink every principle he has relied upon since becoming a hybrid. Kaneki adjusts his stance, coiling his kaguni tighter, readying himself not for a direct strike, but for observation, for testing boundaries. Each motion is deliberate, each breath measured. He knows that underestimating Jin-Woo, even momentarily, would result in annihilation. He begins to treat this encounter as a reconnaissance mission, studying the patterns of shadows, the subtle nuances in body language, and the quiet indicators of command that reveal the extent of control Jin-Woo wields over his domain. Even without engaging fully, Kaneki learns rapidly, absorbing knowledge that could redefine his approach to power, combat, and strategy in Tokyo. From above, Jin-Woo remains composed, his expression unreadable, his presence unyielding. He observes Kaneki's subtle adjustments, noting every micro-movement, every flicker of tension, and every shift in instinctive reaction. His shadows extend just enough to probe, to test, without fully committing. This is not a fight for survival. This is a calibration, a measuring of potential and a subtle imposition of dominance. Kaneki's awareness of the shadows, his attempts to anticipate their movement, and his cautious probing are all being catalogued, refined, and stored by the King of Shadows. The young hybrid realizes slowly that his opponent is not merely reacting, but controlling the battlefield in ways he cannot yet comprehend, creating a dynamic where resistance itself becomes a lesson in futility. The city around them remains eerily silent, as if sensing the significance of this encounter. Every distant footstep, every flicker of light, every shadow across the walls contributes to a tension that vibrates through Tokyo. Kaneki senses it, feels it pressing against him, an oppressive awareness that he cannot escape. Jin-Woo's presence is everywhere and nowhere, an invisible hand guiding every possible outcome. Kaneki's mind races, calculating risk, searching for openings, attempting to predict reactions. Yet he recognizes that for every potential advantage, Jin-Woo has already accounted, nullified, or repurposed it. The young hybrid's confidence, once unshakable in combat, is tempered by the realization that he is facing an apex predator whose mastery extends beyond raw power into the very structure of perception and strategy. Kaneki narrows his eyes, coiling fully into combat readiness, yet there is no rash aggression. He understands that this confrontation will not be won by force alone, nor by instinct. He must adapt, analyze, and respond to a predator who shapes not just the immediate fight, but the environment, the psychology, and the very possibilities of action. Jin-Woo remains still, allowing Kaneki to process, to measure, and to acknowledge the inevitability of the challenge before him. The King of Shadows has arrived, and this meeting is not merely a clash. It is the birth of a dynamic where power, perception, and control intersect, and where Kaneki realizes for the first time that Tokyo itself has changed under the presence of a predator unlike any he has faced before. Kaneki's eyes narrow as he begins to shift his strategy, realizing that a frontal assault would be suicidal. Every instinct he's relied on for survival, reflexes honed in battles against SS-rated ghouls, the cunning gained from countless ambushes, the strategic improvisation learned through years of blood and loss, is being measured, countered, and rendered insufficient by Jin-Woo's subtle control of the battlefield. Each shadow, each flicker of movement is not random but calculated, a silent expression of dominance. Kaneki tests with small, controlled strikes, trying to gauge the limits of this unknown power. Yet every movement is met with immediate correction, subtle enough to make the hybrid doubt his own perceptions. The realization hits. He is not facing a fighter in the conventional sense, but a force that manipulates the very probabilities of battle itself. For the first time, Kaneki feels a pressure unlike any he has experienced, a psychic weight that presses on his thoughts and instincts, compelling him to reconsider the very nature of combat. He recognizes that Jin-Woo is not merely observing, he is teaching through demonstration. Every minor adjustment of the shadows, every restrained movement, every subtle shift in positioning communicates a principle. Control is absolute, patience is supreme, and domination can be achieved without bloodshed if wielded with precision. Kaneki senses the implications. To survive, to challenge, to even understand, he must think beyond instinct, beyond strength, and beyond traditional strategy. This is not a fight of power, it is a confrontation with inevitability itself. Kaneki begins to adapt, moving cautiously yet deliberately, attempting to probe the limits of Jin-Woo's perception. Each strike is small, analytical, intended to test responses rather than inflict damage. His kagune twists and lashes with controlled intensity, his mind racing to identify patterns, anomalies, and openings. Jin-Woo responds with a calm, almost imperceptible shift of shadows, intercepting or redirecting each attempt with minimal movement. It becomes apparent to Kaneki that every approach, every possible action, has already been accounted for. Resistance is not futile because of the overwhelming force. It is futile because the battlefield itself has been aligned against him in ways he cannot yet fully perceive. A subtle tension grows between the two combatants. Kaneki, the hybrid who has survived impossible odds, begins to understand the scale of what he faces. This is a being who transcends traditional combat, someone who observes, adapts, and manipulates with precision that borders on omniscience. Every flicker of movement, every instinctual reaction is catalogued, studied, and either accommodated or neutralized. Kaneki's mind races to develop strategies, but each thought is shadowed by the realization that Jin-Woo has already anticipated, accounted for, and countered the potential outcome. The young hybrid feels an unfamiliar mixture of awe and unease. Here is a predator who does not merely hunt. He shapes the environment, manipulates perception, and redefines what it means to dominate. The city around them mirrors the tension between these two forces. Abandoned streets, rusted rooftops, and dimly lit alleyways all become instruments of observation, channels through which Jin-Woo projects control. Kaneki senses the subtle shifts, the way shadows twist to monitor, the way debris seems to arrange itself with intention, the way even the distant cityscape reflects the silent, methodical influence of an apex predator. He realizes that he is not simply fighting an individual. He is engaging with a system, a presence that has integrated itself into the very structure of the city. Every move, every breath, every calculated strike is met with a silent, precise response that enforces the King of Shadows' dominance. Kaneki adjusts his stance, preparing for a prolonged encounter, not with the goal of victory, but with the aim of survival and understanding. He begins to treat the battle as a study, observing patterns, testing variables, and identifying subtle weaknesses, not in strength, but in execution, in timing, in opportunity. Jin-Woo remains patient, allowing the young hybrid to probe, to adapt, and to recognize the scale of the challenge. The dynamic is no longer purely physical, it is psychological, tactical, and existential. Kaneki senses that to truly contend with this force, he must expand his understanding of combat, of instinct, and of fear itself. The two stand poised, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. Kaneki's kaguni coils ready to lash, yet every potential strike is met with anticipation, redirection, or subtle counterbalance by Jin-Woo's shadows. The young hybrid recognizes the futility of conventional aggression. He feels a creeping realization that strength alone will not suffice. Jin-Woo has imposed a system in which resistance is constrained. Options are limited, and the very act of engagement is a lesson in the consequences of underestimating the apex predator. The standoff becomes a silent dialogue, a conversation of instinct, perception, and control. Kaneki's thoughts race. Every lesson he has learned in survival, every tactical maneuver, every experience facing ghouls and predators has led to this moment. Yet he understands the scale of Jin-Woo's dominance cannot be measured by conventional metrics. The young hybrid feels both fear and fascination, an acknowledgement of the inevitable. This is a being whose command over shadows, perception, and strategic foresight reshapes the battlefield before a single strike lands. Every instinct he has honed is now both a tool and a challenge, tested against a presence that cannot be matched by strength alone. The city seems to hold its breath as night deepens. Each shadow, each alleyway, each rooftop becomes a silent witness to the encounter. Kaneki senses the precision of Jin-Woo's observation, the inevitability of his control, and the overwhelming intelligence guiding every movement. The King of Shadows has not yet attacked, and yet every facet of the environment, every behavioral nuance of the hybrid, and every potential reaction has been catalogued, influencing the outcome in subtle, unyielding ways. Kaneki realizes fully that this is not merely a meeting of two fighters. It is the introduction of a force that reshapes the very principles of survival, combat, and fear in Tokyo. Kaneki takes a deep, controlled breath, forcing himself to focus despite the oppressive weight of Jin-Woo's presence. His body remains coiled, Kagun ready, yet his mind races faster than his instincts. He has faced monsters capable of destroying entire squads, but none have imposed dominance without striking a single blow. The young hybrid realizes that this is not a battle of raw power, but a confrontation with inevitability itself. Every twitch of a shadow, every subtle movement in the periphery of his vision, every imperceptible shift in the battlefield reinforces the inescapable truth. He is facing a predator who defines the rules of engagement, a being for whom instinct is only a variable to manipulate rather than a weapon to wield. Kaneki's eyes scan the environment. The industrial district, abandoned yet alive with latent energy, becomes a silent chessboard. Rusted beams, scattered debris, and dim lighting are not just obstacles, but instruments of observation, feeding into the King of Shadows' awareness. He senses the reach of Jin-Woo's control in ways that defy logic. Every alleyway, every rooftop, even the shadows themselves seem to respond instinctively to his actions. The hybrid's mind stretches to comprehend the scale of this dominance, but the more he perceives, the more he realizes the futility of conventional thought. Jin-Woo is not reacting, he is orchestrating, predicting, and subtly constraining outcomes before they manifest. Survival here is no longer about reflex or strength, but about adaptation to a predator whose intellect and perception are as formidable as his power. A low, almost imperceptible ripple moves through the shadows surrounding Jin-Woo, drawing Kaneki's attention. He senses an intelligence embedded in every shifting silhouette, every subtle twitch. His first attempts to probe this intelligence, small strikes and feints, are met with immediate, precise counters. He feels the resistance of the shadows as if they were extensions of an unseen mind, intercepting attacks before they can reach their mark. Each move he makes is catalogued, every possible reaction noted. The hybrid experiences a strange mixture of awe and unease. He is not just fighting an opponent, he is engaging with a system, a presence that learns, adapts, and dominates without physical contact. Kaneki steps back slightly, recalibrating, testing the boundaries of Jin-Woo's domain. Shadows twist subtly, following, observing, and responding to even the faintest motion. He tries to bait reactions, to create openings, but each attempt is neutralized before it fully forms. Jin-Woo remains calm, composed, the epitome of patience, allowing Kaneki to understand through demonstration rather than conflict. The young hybrid recognizes that the King of Shadows' goal is not immediate conquest, but comprehension, forcing Kaneki to acknowledge the scale of power and control he has entered into. This is not a fight. It is a lesson in the absolute, a calibration of fear, respect, and awareness. The tension between the two intensifies, yet there is no aggression. Kaneki senses the subtle war of wills, the unspoken communication through posture, shadow, and instinct. He tests again, small, precise strikes, probing for weakness, looking for imperfection. The shadows respond with fluid precision, countering, redirecting, and observing. Kaneki realizes that for every action he takes, the outcome has already been considered, cataloged, and countered. The dynamic is no longer one of offense and defense. It is a battle of perception and control, where the very act of existing in the environment becomes a test of dominance. As the encounter continues, Kaneki's mind begins to shift from instinctual aggression to analytical observation. He studies the patterns of the shadows, the way Jin-Woo's posture subtly influences his surroundings, the timing of each movement. Every flicker of intent is intercepted, every strategy anticipated. The hybrid begins to understand that to challenge this presence, he must expand beyond instinct and raw strength. He must engage with the predator on a level of intellect, perception, and adaptability previously untested. Survival is no longer measured in speed or power, but in understanding, patience, and the ability to perceive the invisible threads controlling the battlefield. Kaneki's breathing steadies as he acknowledges the truth of the situation. Jin-Woo does not need to strike to dominate. The mere existence of the Shadow Monarch reshapes every potential outcome. The young hybrid senses the magnitude of this realization, feeling both the weight of fear and the spark of fascination. He is witnessing a predator who controls not just the physical, but the psychological and spatial dimensions of combat. Every step he takes, every micro-adjustment he makes is under observation, influence, and potential counteraction. The city itself seems to respond to Jin-Woo's presence, shadows twisting, light bending, and even the distant hum of activity carrying a subtle tension. Kaneki finally comes to a slow, deliberate stop, realizing that this encounter is not a battle of winners and losers. Yet, it is an encounter of acknowledgement, a recognition of hierarchy, and a confrontation with inevitability. The King of Shadows remains poised, silent, and overwhelmingly present, his control extending through every shadow, every alley, and every subtle nuance of the environment. Kaneki understands, perhaps for the first time, that he is facing a force that transcends conventional combat, that manipulates perception, instinct, and outcome simultaneously, and that has rewritten the rules of survival in Tokyo. The standoff lingers, a tense pause that vibrates with potential energy. Kaneki's eyes narrow, not in defiance, but in calculated acceptance of the challenge before him. He senses the extent of Jin-Woo's power, the reach of his influence, and the depth of his strategic foresight. The city itself seems to hold its breath, every shadow and alleyway aligned with the silent authority of the Shadow Monarch. This is not merely a meeting of two powerful entities. It is the birth of a dynamic that will redefine the balance of power in Tokyo. Kaneki realizes fully that he is in the presence of the apex predator, a being whose control, perception, and intelligence exceed anything he has ever encountered, and that the consequences of this meeting will resonate far beyond the streets of this abandoned district. The encounter concludes, for now, without bloodshed or chaos, yet the impact is profound. Kaneki's understanding of combat, strategy, and survival has been irrevocably altered. The King of Shadows has not only demonstrated supremacy, but has rewritten the psychological rules of engagement for the hybrid, leaving an indelible mark on his mind. Fear, respect, and awe intermingle as Kaneki steps back, recognizing the scale of the power before him. This first meeting has established a hierarchy, a system of dominance, and a precedent that will influence every future encounter in Tokyo, signaling the arrival of a predator whose shadow will loom over the city for as long as he chooses to remain. Before we dive into this next chapter, picture a city trembling under the weight of unseen dominion. Drop a comment right now with your theory on which Ghoul King will feel Sung Jin-Woo's wrath first, because what happens next will leave Tokyo gasping. The city has already begun to shift under the influence of the Shadow Monarch. Every street, every alley, every rooftop acts as both a stage and a trap, with Jin-Woo's shadows flowing like liquid over the urban landscape, observing, adapting, and preparing for the moment of inevitable confrontation. The Ghoul Kings, leaders of power, ambition, and terror, have ruled their territories with strength and fear, confident in their supremacy. Yet even their perception cannot grasp the scale of a predator who does not merely hunt, but reshapes the battlefield and instills a psychological hierarchy before lifting a single hand. Deep within the heart of Tokyo, the Ghoul Kings gather. Aogiri Tree's elite, members of the White Suits, and other apex predators convene in their respective strongholds, each aware of strange disturbances in the city. Communications intercepts report anomalies, entire squads eliminated with surgical precision, territories abandoned without a fight, and the first whispers of a being whose dominance cannot be challenged conventionally. The kings exchange wary glances, recognizing a threat that surpasses even their most dangerous rivals. For the first time, uncertainty gnaws at their confidence. Every instinct that once guaranteed authority now trembles under the weight of a force that cannot be measured, only feared. Jin-Woo begins his descent upon the first territory. Shadows ripple across the skyline, moving faster than the eye can follow, converging upon the Ghoul stronghold with silent inevitability. The Ghoul King, a towering figure of muscle, Kagoon extended and eyes burning with predatory intensity, senses the impending confrontation. He rallies his elite guards, SS-rated lieutenants, whose reputations strike fear into lesser ghouls. Yet before they can even organize, subtle movements in the darkness begin to unsettle them. Shadows stretch, whip, and coil in ways that defy natural law, creating an environment where attack and retreat are both constrained, choices limited, and every action anticipated. The Ghoul King senses that he is no longer in a world dictated by his rules. The first strike is quiet but decisive. Shadows erupt not chaotically but surgically, immobilizing key lieutenants and neutralizing threats with precise, calculated force. The Ghoul King tries to respond, lashing with Kagoon, deploying every offensive maneuver he has mastered over decades, yet Jin-Woo's shadows counter without hesitation. Each attack meets resistance, redirection, or subtle restraint that forces him into a defensive position. Confusion spreads among the ranks as the elite ghouls realize their instincts, honed over years of battle, are no longer reliable. Even the strongest among them hesitate, uncertainty undermining coordination, and fear, the kind that comes from witnessing mastery beyond comprehension, begins to take root. The city watches silently as Jin-Woo closes the distance. The Ghoul King's confidence, once unshakable, falters under the invisible weight pressing upon every movement. Every step is calculated, every shadow adjusted, and the balance of power begins to shift before a single direct blow lands. Subordinates fall in precise sequences, traps neutralized before they can be sprung, and escape routes become illusions as Jin-Woo's presence dominates the battlefield. The Ghoul King attempts to rally, to assert control, but even his most loyal lieutenants falter. Instinctively aware that resistance is already being measured and contained by a force beyond their understanding. A crucial lesson unfolds in real time. Jin-Woo does not rely on chaotic destruction. He does not rage, nor does he strike recklessly. His attacks, when they come, are deliberate, minimal, and overwhelmingly effective, demonstrating not just power but intelligence, foresight, and the ability to manipulate the battlefield itself. The Ghoul King, for all his ferocity and experience, finds himself constrained by his own instincts, his decisions anticipated and countered before they materialize. The first apex predator of Tokyo realizes the horrifying truth. This is not a fight of equals. He is facing a predator who has rewritten the rules of combat before he even drew breath. Meanwhile, other Ghoul Kings across Tokyo sense the disruption. Territories that were once secure fall silent. SS-ranked ghouls fail to report back. The ripples of Jin-Woo's influence spread faster than any report or communication could travel. Each leader feels the psychological pressure, a creeping awareness that their supremacy is challenged not through brute force alone, but through control, anticipation, and dominance that manifests before engagement. Fear spreads, infecting even the boldest among them, and coordination begins to crumble citywide. The hierarchy they once imposed now bends under the shadow of a force that neither human nor ghoul can easily measure. In one particular stronghold, an elite Ghoul King attempts to mobilize a counterattack. He sends squads into strategic positions, relying on traditional strength, coordination, and the experience of his SS-ranked lieutenants. Yet before any offensive can begin, shadows infiltrate the space silently, neutralizing threats with surgical precision. Escape routes collapse, and key lieutenants are restrained before engagement. Panic begins to spread as the Ghoul King realizes that every strategy has been anticipated and every potential move has already been accounted for. The environment itself becomes a weapon, with Jin-Woo's control extending through alleys, rooftops, and every shadow, leaving the apex predator exposed and vulnerable in ways he never imagined. As the first Ghoul King falls, subdued not through chaos but through methodical dominance, the message spreads across Tokyo. Apex predators who once ruled with fear and power now hesitate. The influence of the Shadow Monarch is undeniable. Control, anticipation, and psychological domination have proven more effective than any physical assault. Each territory Jin-Woo approaches witnesses the same pattern: precision, restraint, and inevitability. The city itself seems to respond to his presence, streets twisting into subtle mazes, shadows warping to contain, and the air thickening with anticipation and dread. Even Kaneki, observing from a distance, senses the scale of the transformation. He understands, perhaps more clearly than anyone else, that Jin-Woo is dismantling the hierarchy of ghouls not merely through power, but through control, fear, and the imposition of absolute dominance. The fall of the Ghoul Kings is not a chaotic massacre. It is a systematic restructuring of the power balance in Tokyo, where every apex predator learns that survival is no longer determined by instinct, strength, or strategy alone, but by recognition of the force that now rules in shadows. The first phase of this systematic collapse demonstrates a terrifying principle. Power alone does not dictate dominance. Control, anticipation, and psychological manipulation are weapons more potent than raw strength. As the night deepens, each Ghoul King confronts the stark reality that their reign is ending, not with a roar, but with the silent, calculated arrival of a predator who has redefined the rules of the city. Sung Jin-Woo has not merely entered Tokyo, he has claimed it, and the shadow of his dominance spreads further with every calculated step. The defeat of the first Ghoul King sends shockwaves throughout the city. Word spreads quickly among the ranks of ghouls and human operatives alike, though often indirectly. Rumors, sightings of shadows moving unnaturally, reports of entire squads disappearing without trace. Fear begins to take root in a way that brute force never could. Even the most seasoned SS-ranked ghouls feel an unfamiliar hesitation, instinctively pausing before engaging in conflict, uncertain whether what they face is an opponent or a force beyond comprehension. Jin-Woo's influence does not rely on intimidation alone. It is methodical, precise, and absolute. Every move he makes reinforces the idea that resistance is futile, that power without comprehension is meaningless, and that survival hinges on adaptation to an entirely new paradigm of combat. The next Ghoul King is less fortunate. This leader, known for his ruthlessness and strategic mind, attempts to consolidate his territory in anticipation of Jin-Woo's arrival. He mobilizes elite lieutenants, setting traps and ambushes, believing that overwhelming force can neutralize this intruder. Yet Jin-Woo approaches not with aggression, but with calculation. Shadows flow silently across rooftops and through alleyways, infiltrating spaces that were once considered secure. Before the Ghoul King can enact any plan, key lieutenants are neutralized, traps rendered ineffective, and the environment itself seems to resist him. The apex predator realizes too late that he is fighting not just a man, but a system of dominance that adapts and reacts instantaneously to every conceivable move. Jin-Woo's shadows strike not with reckless violence, but with precise efficiency. Key threats are restrained, incapacitated, or eliminated in a way that prevents chaos while maximizing psychological impact. The Ghoul King finds his strength irrelevant. His strategic brilliance anticipated and countered. Every strike, every maneuver, every instinct is calculated against, leaving him exposed in ways previously unthinkable. His followers begin to hesitate, confusion rippling through the ranks as the seemingly invincible predator demonstrates that mastery does not require aggression, only control. By the time the confrontation ends, the Ghoul King has been subdued, not in a chaotic battle, but through a display of absolute dominance that reshapes the rules of engagement entirely. News of the successive falls spreads rapidly among the ghoul hierarchy. Apex predators who once ruled with unchallenged authority begin to reconsider their positions, territories, and tactics. The balance of power shifts dramatically as fear and uncertainty replace confidence and arrogance. Jin-Woo's method is clear. Dominance is established not through fear of injury alone, but through the recognition that any challenge can be anticipated, countered, and nullified before it even begins. Each Ghoul King who witnesses or hears of these events internalizes the lesson that their instincts and previous strategies are no longer sufficient. Kaneki watches from a safe distance, analyzing Jin-Woo's methodical approach with keen interest. He notes how the Shadow Monarch prioritizes observation, calculation, and precision over indiscriminate aggression. The young hybrid begins to understand that Jin-Woo's power extends far beyond physical might. It is the ability to manipulate perception, control the battlefield, and enforce psychological dominance without unnecessary confrontation. Kaneki recognizes that the fall of the Ghoul Kings is as much about restructuring the hierarchy of fear as it is about eliminating threats. Every calculated strike, every shadow deployed is part of a larger strategy designed to reassert control over a city that has long operated under chaos and terror. As the night deepens, Jin-Woo continues his systematic campaign. Territories that were once bastions of power now fall into disarray, abandoned by SS-ranked ghouls unwilling to risk engagement. The city itself seems to respond to his presence. Shadows shift, light bends subtly, and the environment becomes an extension of his will. Ghouls, both high-ranking and mid-tier, adjust their movements, avoid confrontations, and reevaluate alliances. The fall of the Ghoul Kings is not an isolated incident, but a cascading effect, reshaping the entire social and territorial structure of Tokyo's underworld. By the time the city reaches the darkest hours, Jin-Woo has solidified his presence in multiple districts simultaneously. Shadow scouts, subtle yet omnipresent, monitor remaining threats, ensuring that no apex predator can regain confidence or territory without first confronting the Shadow Monarch directly. Fear has become the currency of dominance, and Jin-Woo wields it with unmatched expertise. The Ghoul King's reign has ended, not with explosive battles or chaotic carnage, but through silent, systematic, and inevitable domination. Their legacy of terror is eclipsed by a presence that enforces control through intelligence, anticipation, and psychological precision. The stage is now set for the final phase of his campaign. With the Ghoul Kings subdued and the city trembling under his influence, Jin-Woo has rewritten the rules of engagement, establishing a hierarchy where the strongest predators, human or ghoul, must recognize his supremacy. The psychological impact of these victories extends beyond territory or numbers. It redefines the very concept of power in Tokyo. Every operative, every predator, and every human who senses the shift understands that the Shadow Monarch has arrived, and that the fall of the Ghoul Kings is only the beginning of a transformation that will change the city forever. The psychological ripple effect of the Ghoul Kings' defeat spreads faster than any physical confrontation could. Across Tokyo, SS-ranked ghouls begin to question their strategies, second-guess their instincts, and hesitate in ways they never have before. Territories that were once hotbeds of dominance fall into temporary chaos as subordinate ghouls retreat, unsure of who or what now truly controls the city. Jin-Woo's presence is not overt in every district, yet it is felt everywhere. A silent force that dictates outcomes without engaging directly. Fear has become a weapon, sharper and deadlier than any Kagun or Quink, and it cuts through the confidence of even the most seasoned apex predators. In another part of the city, a Ghoul King, renowned for his brutality, prepares for confrontation, gathering his strongest lieutenants and setting up a fortified position in a high-rise complex. He believes that sheer aggression and overwhelming numbers can counteract this mysterious force, but his calculations are flawed. Shadows begin to move ahead of Jin-Woo's arrival, infiltrating weak points in the complex and restraining critical lieutenants before the battle begins. The king strikes, unleashing his Kagun with lethal precision. Yet Jin-Woo's shadows intercept, redirect, and neutralize each attack with minimal exertion. The apex predator experiences frustration unlike any he has known, a gnawing realization that raw strength alone cannot guarantee survival in the presence of the Shadow Monarch. Jin-Woo's movements remain calm, deliberate, and almost invisible, his shadows performing the work of elimination and control with uncanny efficiency. Each strike is calculated to dismantle authority rather than chaos, to neutralize leaders without unnecessary collateral, and to ensure that fear spreads more effectively than blood. The Ghoul King struggles to maintain command, but the subtle manipulation of space, timing, and perception works against him. Lieutenants hesitate, followers panic, and even the king himself realizes the futility of his assault. The fall is inevitable, not because of overwhelming power, but because Jin-Woo has already rewritten the rules of engagement, forcing his opponents into patterns that lead to their own defeat. Meanwhile, Kaneki observes from a distance, studying the systematic dismantling of Tokyo's ghoul hierarchy. He notes how Jin-Woo's approach is almost surgical, precise, and psychological in nature. No unnecessary violence, no wasted energy, yet the results are devastating. Each Ghoul King who resists is incapacitated, every territory secured, and every subordinate forced to recognize a new apex predator. Kaneki begins to grasp the magnitude of Jin-Woo's power, understanding that it is as much about controlling perception, expectation, and fear as it is about raw strength. The young hybrid senses that the fall of the Ghoul Kings will have lasting consequences, reshaping the city's ecosystem and forcing every predator to reconsider their survival strategies. As the night progresses, Jin-Woo moves from district to district, his shadows stretching across the city like a dark, sentient tide. Each confrontation follows the same pattern, precise, controlled, inevitable. The Ghoul Kings attempt to coordinate, to strike preemptively, but each plan is anticipated and dismantled before execution. Even when they attempt ambushes, the shadows neutralize threats silently and efficiently, leaving leaders exposed and vulnerable. Panic spreads through the ranks, communication breaks down, and coordination collapses. By the time the Shadow Monarch reaches the heart of each territory, the king's authority is already undermined, their networks of fear and control eroded by psychological precision and superior perception. One of the last remaining Ghoul Kings attempts a desperate stand atop a skyscraper, confident in the perceived advantage of height and territory. He unleashes a barrage of attacks, striking with everything at his disposal. Yet each strike is met with preemptive shadow manipulation. Jin-Woo remains calm, observing the battlefield, his control extending even over environmental elements that could hinder or trap him. The king's aggression only serves to highlight his vulnerabilities, each strike countered or nullified in ways that force him into retreat. Shadows coil around him, binding movement, limiting escape, and psychologically crushing the will to fight. When the final strike lands, it is precise, controlled, and devastating, ending his reign without chaos, without spectacle, yet with maximum effect. The fall of the Ghoul Kings is complete, and Tokyo's underworld is left in stunned silence. Territories once dominated by fear and strength now stand empty or under subtle, invisible control. The SS-ranked ghouls, once confident in their supremacy, move with hesitation, each action measured against the possibility that Jin-Woo is watching, calculating, and waiting. The city has learned a new hierarchy, one defined not by brutality alone, but by anticipation, control, and psychological dominance. Jin-Woo has rewritten the rules of power, establishing himself as the uncontested apex predator. By the end of the night, the impact of these systematic takedowns is undeniable. The psychological imprint of the Shadow Monarch extends beyond the battlefield, influencing behavior, coordination, and decision-making across Tokyo. Even the most powerful predators who survive this night are forced to acknowledge a new reality. Supremacy is not just about strength, aggression, or terror. It is about control, anticipation, and the ability to dominate without unnecessary force. Jin-Woo has demonstrated that a single, calculated presence can dismantle entire hierarchies, and that the fall of the Ghoul Kings is only the beginning of a transformation that will reshape the city forever. The city awakens to a new reality by the first light of dawn, though few recognize it immediately. The Ghoul Kings who once ruled with unchallenged authority have fallen. Their territories destabilized, their influence shattered, and their networks of fear eroded. SS-ranked ghouls who survived the onslaught move cautiously through the streets, their usual confidence replaced by a palpable tension. Every shadow is now a potential threat, every alleyway a possible trap, and every sound carries the weight of uncertainty. Jin-Woo's presence, though largely unseen, dominates the urban landscape, a constant reminder that the apex predator now dictates the rules of engagement. This psychological conquest is as significant as the physical one. Survival is no longer simply about power, but about recognizing and adapting to an intelligence that can anticipate every instinct and maneuver. Even within the remaining ghoul hierarchy, cracks begin to appear. Ambitious lieutenants who once saw themselves as successors to fallen kings hesitate to act, aware that the Shadow Monarch observes all possibilities. Small skirmishes that might have escalated into open conflict are aborted as ghouls instinctively avoid confrontation, recognizing that they are outmatched not by raw strength, but by foresight, precision, and calculated dominance. Jin-Woo's campaign has reshaped their perception of power. Dominance is no longer earned through fear or force alone, but through the ability to control the battlefield, manipulate perception, and instill inevitable dread. The fall of the Ghoul Kings serves as a masterclass in absolute supremacy, a demonstration that leadership in Tokyo now belongs to the one who dictates the environment before a fight even begins. Kaneki watches the aftermath with a mixture of awe, fear, and reluctant admiration. He understands more clearly than anyone else that Jin-Woo has not only dismantled the physical authority of the Ghoul Kings, but has also rewritten the psychological landscape of the city. The young hybrid reflects on his own abilities, realizing that instinct, strength, and Kaguni mastery are insufficient when confronted by a force that has redefined the parameters of combat and control. Each district Jin-Woo touches becomes a testament to his strategy. No unnecessary chaos, no wasted effort, only decisive, precise action that enforces dominance with minimal expenditure. Kaneki internalizes these lessons, recognizing that survival now demands adaptability, awareness, and respect for forces that can manipulate perception, instinct, and reality itself. In the districts surrounding the former strongholds, subordinate ghouls attempt to regroup. Some flee, seeking safety in corners of the city once thought secure, while others attempt cautious reconnaissance, probing for weaknesses or patterns in Jin-Woo's behavior. Yet each move is countered subtly, efficiently, and inevitably. Shadow scouts extend outward like unseen sentinels, monitoring behavior, limiting options, and ensuring that even tentative resistance is measured against the overwhelming influence of the Shadow Monarch. The city itself seems complicated. Every shadow, every reflective surface, every alleyway part of a system that reinforces Jin-Woo's dominance. The psychological grip tightens, creating an environment where survival is determined as much by perception and restraint as by raw combat ability. By nightfall, the full magnitude of the Ghoul Kings' fall becomes apparent. The city, once ruled by competing apex predators, is now under the subtle dominion of a single force. Neighborhoods that once operated under chaos and territorial disputes are subdued, their rulers incapacitated or displaced, and their followers cautious, hesitant, and fearful. Jin-Woo's calculated approach has ensured that power is asserted without unnecessary destruction, that fear is instilled without indiscriminate violence, and that the hierarchy of Tokyo has been fundamentally restructured. This transformation is not immediate in visibility, but in its long-lasting consequences, the city has been irrevocably altered. Even among the human operatives of the CCG and other monitoring agencies, reports begin to trickle in. Patterns of disappearance, unusual control of areas, and the elimination of high-ranking ghouls without widespread chaos. Analysts recognize that this is not the work of a typical predator. The scale, efficiency, and precision suggest an intelligence capable of anticipating outcomes before actions are taken. Whispers of the Shadow Monarch spread, carrying not only reports of power, but also the realization that a new apex predator now dictates the hierarchy, one whose methods and influence transcend conventional understanding. As the final Ghoul Kings territories are either subdued or abandoned, the cumulative effect becomes clear. Jin-Woo has not just defeated individuals, he has dismantled a system of fear and authority that ruled Tokyo for decades. His shadows, pervasive and precise, have become instruments of control, reshaping the city into a domain where resistance is measured, contained, and neutralized with minimal direct engagement. Each remaining predator recognizes that supremacy is no longer determined by raw strength, strategy, or intimidation alone, but by the ability to impose order, anticipate outcomes, and enforce psychological dominance with precision. The fall of the Ghoul Kings is complete, leaving a city forever changed and a new ruler established, not merely by might, but by mastery of perception, fear, and inevitability. Before we jump into the final act, take a moment and drop a comment about which character you think could even attempt to challenge Sung Jin-Woo in the Tokyo Ghoul universe, because by the end of this segment, it will be obvious that the world itself cannot keep up with him. The city lies in uneasy silence. The Ghoul Kings are gone, their territories abandoned or under subtle control, and the streets themselves seem to breathe in anticipation of the next movement. Jin-Woo's presence is no longer a rumor or a fleeting shadow. It is the dominant force shaping reality, a silent hand guiding outcomes across Tokyo. Every predator, every human, every hybrid senses a fundamental shift. The apex predator is not merely powerful, he is inevitable, and resistance is now an exercise in futility. The world reacts even before he moves. In the alleys where ghouls once roamed freely, patterns of behavior begin to shift. Subordinates, unsure of the remaining hierarchy, move cautiously, avoiding confrontation, whispering warnings to each other, and recalculating survival strategies in real time. CCG agents, having intercepted irregular activity in the city, report anomalies that defy explanation. entire squads disappearing without traces, conflicts resolved without engagement, and territories realigning under the influence of an unseen hand. The humans recognize the emergence of a predator unlike any they have cataloged, someone whose strength, perception, and command over the battlefield transcend normal understanding. Jin-Woo's presence is not just felt, it is studied, feared, and recorded as an anomaly beyond conventional classification. Kaneki watches from a distance, his mind racing. He has faced horrors that would have destroyed others, navigated betrayals, massacres, and unimaginable power. Yet even he senses the magnitude of Jin-Woo's influence. The young hybrid realizes that this is no longer a question of combat alone. The rules of the Tokyo Ghoul universe have shifted. Jin-Woo's shadows ripple across the city like extensions of his will, creating networks of observation, manipulation, and inevitability. Each ghoul or human who attempts to challenge the natural order finds their options limited, their instincts manipulated, and their confidence eroded before engagement. Jin-Woo moves through this world not as a participant but as an architect of its outcomes, demonstrating that dominance can exist without constant physical confrontation. The remaining ghoul factions, scattered and disoriented, attempt to coordinate. They send scouts, deploy traps, and seek reinforcements from allied territories, yet each effort is intercepted before it can bear fruit. Shadows anticipate movement, disrupt communication, and isolate threats with surgical precision. The apex predators who once ruled their corners of the city realize, in a chilling moment of clarity, that conventional hierarchy and strategy no longer apply. Jin-Woo's dominion is both subtle and absolute, extending through every shadow, every street, and every angle of approach. Resistance becomes an act of futility, not merely because of power, but because the structure of possibility itself has been rewritten. Even the environment bends to his presence. Light, shadow, and sound become tools in his arsenal, manipulated to create confusion, observation, and containment. Rooftops, alleyways, and abandoned buildings are not merely terrain. They are extensions of his control, reinforcing fear and enforcing a subtle dominance that grows stronger with every passing moment. Observers, human and ghoul alike, notice the psychological transformation in those around him. Even those who have survived countless battles with apex predators experience hesitation, uncertainty, and the creeping acknowledgement that Sung Jin-Woo operates beyond conventional rules. The city has become both his battlefield and his instrument, a domain where inevitability is the deadliest weapon. Kaneki reflects on the implications of this transformation. He understands that survival in this world is no longer dictated solely by strength, experience, or instinct. Adaptation, awareness, and comprehension of Jin-Woo's omnipresent influence are now essential. Every movement he makes, every decision, must account for a presence that operates beyond the physical plane of combat, one that anticipates outcomes, manipulates perception, and enforces dominance without immediate confrontation. Jin-Woo has not only defeated apex predators, but has fundamentally altered the balance of power, instilling a new hierarchy defined not by raw force, but by inevitability, control, and precision. The psychological dominance extends further than any individual. Human organizations, intelligence networks, and even independent vigilantes feel the shift in Tokyo's power dynamics. Reports flood in of ghouls avoiding confrontation, anomalies in expected behavior, and the silent, inexplicable disappearance of elite operatives. Observers record patterns they cannot fully comprehend, yet instinctively recognize as the fingerprints of a predator beyond classification. Jin-Woo's influence has become systemic, an invisible law of the city that dictates outcomes before actions occur. Tokyo itself adapts, reorganizes, and bends subtly to accommodate a presence it cannot oppose. In the heart of what was once the most dangerous district, Jin-Woo surveys the cityscape. Shadows extend from him like living tendrils, probing alleys, monitoring streets, and enforcing a quiet, pervasive control. He does not need to strike to command. His will suffices. Ghouls, humans, and hybrids adjust their movements instinctively, aware that the Shadow Monarch's awareness is absolute and his intervention inevitable if resistance is attempted. The city becomes a living chessboard, every piece aligned according to a strategy that can anticipate, counter, and dominate simultaneously. The apex predator has redefined what it means to hold power. Supremacy is not measured by victories alone, but by the absolute control of possibility itself. By now, it becomes clear that no entity in Tokyo possesses the capability to halt him. Every potential challenger is either eliminated, neutralized, or constrained psychologically before engagement. The world reacts, but cannot adapt quickly enough to resist. Every movement Jin-Woo makes consolidates control, reshapes fear, and reinforces dominance. The Ghoul King's fall was only the first step. The remaining predators, human and ghoul alike, are faced with a reality where survival requires acknowledgement of a presence they cannot compete with. This first phase establishes a terrifying principle. The apex predator is no longer just a being of strength or skill. He is a force of inevitability, shaping the environment, anticipating action, and enforcing outcomes through subtle yet unyielding control. The psychological weight of this dominance transforms the city into his domain, where resistance is not futile due to lack of power, but due to the restructuring of possibility itself. Ghouls, humans, and hybrids now operate under the silent acknowledgement that Sung Jin-Woo is unstoppable, a predator whose influence extends beyond combat into the very essence of survival and strategy in Tokyo. Jin-Woo's presence is no longer a distant threat. It is the defining reality of Tokyo. The streets, once chaotic and unpredictable, have become an extension of his will. Every shadow, every building, every flicker of movement is subtly controlled, monitored, and influenced. The remaining ghouls, even those who survive with their strength intact, find themselves paralyzed by the unseen hand of inevitability. Instincts honed over decades fail them because the Shadow Monarch anticipates each possible reaction before it occurs. Hesitation replaces aggression, fear replaces confidence, and even the most experienced predators are forced into defensive postures they cannot break. The city itself has become a mirror of Jin-Woo's strategic mind, responsive, calculating, and implacable. Even the CCG feels the subtle but profound shift. Intelligence networks report anomalies that cannot be explained by conventional methods. Elite ghouls neutralized without engagement, territories abandoned without conflict, and a pervasive psychological dominance that inhibits action before it begins. Analysts attempt to calculate his strength, yet data proves insufficient. Jin-Woo operates beyond traditional metrics, redefining what it means to be an apex predator. Every observer, human or ghoul, begins to understand that this is not a battle that can be fought with physical power alone. The mere presence of the Shadow Monarch enforces compliance, reshapes behavior, and constrains outcomes across the city. Kaneki continues to watch from the shadows, struck by the enormity of what he is witnessing. He realizes that Jin-Woo's strategy does not rely on overwhelming force, numbers, or indiscriminate destruction. Instead, the Shadow Monarch relies on anticipation, control, and precise application of power. Each shadow, each subtle adjustment of the battlefield, each isolated intervention serves a dual purpose, neutralizing immediate threats and reinforcing psychological dominance. The hybrid recognizes that the fall of the Ghoul Kings was only the beginning. The real transformation lies in the way Jin-Woo reshapes the perception of power itself, leaving an imprint on Tokyo's predators that will persist long after individual battles have ended. Across the city, smaller ghoul factions and independent predators find themselves reacting to an invisible force. Decisions are made tentatively, alliances re-examined, and confrontations avoided. The idea of challenging Jin-Woo has become unthinkable, not due to direct confrontation, but because the outcome is already predetermined by the subtle, pervasive influence he exerts. Even those who pride themselves on cunning, strength, and ruthlessness recognize that the Shadow Monarch has redefined the rules of survival. Fear is no longer merely a reaction. It is an active systemic force shaped by the apex predators, guiding behavior, suppressing resistance, and reinforcing control without a single chaotic clash. Jin-Woo moves through the city with deliberate calm, shadows stretching outward like sentinels, monitoring potential threats, intercepting movements, and enforcing the unspoken hierarchy. His presence alters the decisions of every creature within sight. A ghoul hesitates before striking. A human patrol diverts its route, and even Kaneki finds his analytical mind challenged by the sheer scale of observation and foresight. The Shadow Monarch does not need to engage everyone directly. His dominion is imposed before engagement, his supremacy enforced through perception, awareness, and the inevitability of consequence. Survival is no longer dictated by raw strength, but by recognition of a force that operates beyond conventional understanding. As night falls, the transformation of Tokyo is complete. The city, once a chaotic tangle of predator and prey, has become a controlled ecosystem under the silent rule of Jin-Woo. Even remaining threats recognize that defiance carries immediate and predictable consequences. Shadows move with intelligence, buildings and terrain reinforce containment, and the psychological imprint of the apex predator ensures compliance before resistance can even be considered. The urban landscape has become an instrument of dominance, and every creature operating within it is subject to the subtle, unrelenting pressure of an entity that cannot be stopped by traditional means. The remaining ghouls, now leaders of fractured factions, attempt to regroup, but coordination proves nearly impossible. Their previous strategies are obsolete in a world where Jin-Woo's anticipation renders conventional tactics ineffective. Communication is disrupted, movements constrained, and hesitation spreads like a contagion. The apex predator has not only eliminated immediate threats, but has fundamentally altered the operational paradigm for every surviving predator. Each step they take is calculated against the probability that Jin-Woo is already observing, anticipating, and preparing a countermeasure. Fear and respect intertwine, creating an environment where compliance is instinctive and resistance is inherently suicidal. Kaneki reflects on what this means for the balance of power. He sees that Jin-Woo's domination is more than physical. It is psychological, systemic, and strategic. No single predator, human or ghoul, can resist because the rules of engagement have been rewritten. Supremacy now belongs to the one who controls not just action, but perception and consequence. Every district Jin-Woo touches becomes a testament to this principle. Strength alone is meaningless without foresight, control, and the ability to enforce inevitability. The Shadow Monarch's influence has transcended individual combat, creating a world in which his dominance is absolute and unchallengeable. The city itself seems to acknowledge this new order. Shadows ripple with awareness, streets twist to channel movement, and even ambient sounds carry subtle cues that reinforce Jin-Woo's control. Survivors, observers, and potential challengers all internalize the same lesson. The Shadow Monarch is unstoppable, not merely because of raw power, but because the very structure of reality has shifted under his influence. Tokyo has become his domain, a living, breathing extension of his strategy, and no force within the city can counteract the inevitability of his dominance. The city has become a silent stage where every movement, every decision, and every instinct is subtly guided by Jin-Woo's presence. Even predators who once thrived on chaos now find themselves navigating an environment preordained by the Shadow Monarch. Ghouls hesitate before striking, their cocoon faltering mid-attack as unseen shadows manipulate the battlefield. Humans, from CCG operatives to independent investigators, second-guess their strategies, aware that any action could be anticipated and neutralized before it materializes. Jin-Woo's influence extends beyond physical interaction. It is a pervasive force that governs perception, timing, and outcome simultaneously. Each predator, human and hybrid, experiences the weight of inevitability pressing down upon every decision, leaving them no choice but to recognize supremacy that cannot be challenged. Across the city, Minor factions that previously acted independently now operate under the invisible pressure of Jin-Woo's control. Small skirmishes dissipate before they begin. Confrontations dissolve under subtle shadow intervention, and even aggressive ghouls instinctively avoid areas under his influence. The apex predator has redefined the concept of territory. It is no longer claimed by force or fear alone, but by the ability to shape outcomes and manipulate the environment in real time. Each district he moves through becomes a demonstration of absolute dominance, teaching a silent lesson to every predator that observes or survives. Jin-Woo does not need to strike to establish authority. His presence alone enforces compliance and reshapes the city's hierarchy. Kaneki observes these changes and begins to grasp the scale of transformation. He notes how Jin-Woo's methodical approach systematically eliminates not only leaders, but also the psychological structures that allow predators to dominate. The young hybrid realizes that even survival itself now depends on understanding and adapting to the Shadow Monarch's influence. Strength, experience, and tactical knowledge are no longer sufficient. One must account for perception manipulation, environmental control, and anticipation that exceeds conventional combat. Jin-Woo has established supremacy not by fighting every opponent, but by demonstrating that opposition is futile before it even begins. Every predator now understands implicitly and irrevocably that the rules have changed. Even the city's environment seems to bend to Jin-Woo's will. Shadows stretch unnaturally, rooftops provide advantageous lines of control, and abandoned structures act as silent tools of observation and containment. Every alleyway becomes a potential trap, every street a monitored corridor, every building an extension of the Shadow Monarch's strategic mind. This silent domination reinforces psychological control as effectively as any physical strike could. Ghouls, humans, and hybrids internalize this control instinctively, avoiding unnecessary risk, repositioning cautiously, and second-guessing even minor decisions. The city itself has become a living testament to the inevitability of Jin-Woo's influence. The remaining high-ranking ghouls attempt coordination, trying to form alliances or reclaim their territories. Yet each effort falters. Even subtle communication can be intercepted by Jin-Woo's shadow network, movements predicted, and plans dismantled before they can take effect. The apex predator has made clear that the traditional balance of power no longer applies. Resistance is not impossible because of power disparity alone. It is futile because the entire structure of decision-making, anticipation, and environmental control favors him completely. Each failed attempt reinforces the perception of inevitability, spreading fear, hesitation, and uncertainty further through every remaining faction. Kaneki notes the psychological mastery at play. He realizes that Jin-Woo does not rely on brute force alone to dominate Tokyo. He controls perception, shapes expectations, and enforces compliance without unnecessary confrontation. Even the most cunning ghouls find themselves outmaneuvered before they act, and human organizations feel the invisible pressure of an entity whose reach exceeds conventional understanding. The Shadow Monarch's power is as much about systemic control as it is about combat ability. Each move he makes enforces a new hierarchy, not by annihilation, but by reshaping behavior, instilling fear, and demonstrating that resistance is not merely risky, it is irrelevant. The city continues to react, not with chaos, but with subtle compliance. Minor predators retreat from areas they once considered safe. Human squads divert patrols to avoid contact, and even Kaneki senses the weight of control in every shadowed corner. Jin-Woo's influence is omnipresent, his dominance silent yet undeniable. The apex predator has proven that supremacy is no longer defined by raw combat ability alone. It is about shaping the battlefield, manipulating perception, and enforcing inevitability. Tokyo has become a domain where every predator must acknowledge the Shadow Monarch, where the psychological and strategic aspects of power have surpassed all previous limits. By now, it is clear that no force in Tokyo can match him. Every potential challenger hesitates, every organized resistance falters, and every predator who survives internalizes the same chilling reality. Sung Jin-Woo cannot be stopped. His dominance is absolute, systemic, and inevitable. Even without striking directly, he has reshaped the city into a domain under his control, where fear, anticipation, and environmental mastery enforce a hierarchy beyond the comprehension of ghouls, humans, or hybrids. The world has been irrevocably changed, and the apex predator now reigns supreme, not only in strength but in inevitability, strategy, and psychological domination. The final phase of Jin-Woo's campaign cements his unstoppable presence. By now, every predator, human, and hybrid in Tokyo has felt the weight of inevitability. Even those who once held authority and confidence now move cautiously, calculating each step as though the city itself conspires to enforce their submission. Streets that were once battlegrounds have become zones of subtle control, with shadows shifting imperceptibly to monitor, anticipate, and limit movement. Jin-Woo does not need to strive to assert dominance. His very presence has altered the rules of engagement, reshaping behavior, instilling fear, and creating an environment in which survival depends on acknowledgement of his supremacy. The remaining SS-ranked ghouls, though capable fighters, operate under constant hesitation, knowing that any action is anticipated, countered, or neutralized before it even begins. The Shadow Monarch's influence is not just physical, it is psychological, environmental, and systemic, a force that cannot be opposed using conventional methods. Across the city, small factions attempt to regroup, sending scouts to gauge his influence or reclaim lost territories, but each effort is met with subtle opposition. Shadows coil, surveil, and restrict movement without a single direct attack. Every plan is dissected before execution, every route of escape predicted and blocked. Jin-Woo has made resistance irrelevant. The psychological imprint left on the survivors is as potent as any physical defeat, demonstrating that dominance is not merely about strength, numbers, or speed, but about anticipation, control, and the ability to manipulate the battlefield before conflict arises. Fear now acts as an extension of his power, silently enforcing compliance and reshaping the city into a domain governed by his will. Kaneki, observing from a distance, understands the full magnitude of what has occurred. Jin-Woo has not just defeated individuals, he has rewritten the city's entire hierarchy. Strength and aggression are insufficient when confronting a predator who operates on a level where perception, anticipation, and environmental control define supremacy. Each move made by survivors, bystanders, and opponents alike is measured against the inevitability of his presence. The young hybrid realizes that true dominance is not about overwhelming force, but about creating conditions where opposition is mathematically improbable. Jin-Woo's approach leaves no room for error, no possibility for unchecked rebellion, and no chance for anyone to challenge his authority without certain defeat. Even the environment has been subtly transformed by his presence. Shadows shift with sentient precision, alleys funnel movement strategically, and the city itself becomes a tool of observation, restriction, and control. Predators who once relied on instinct and experience now find those very skills neutralized, because Jin-Woo has already accounted for them. Humans feel it too. CCG operatives detect patterns, anomalies, and incidents that defy explanation, yet instinctively sense the hand of a superior force shaping outcomes. Tokyo itself has been rewritten as a chessboard for the Shadow Monarch, each piece aligned according to a strategy that enforces dominance without constant aggression. Survival now requires recognition of power that transcends conventional understanding. By the time night fully settles, the transformation is complete. The Ghoul Kings have fallen, the city trembles under the shadow of inevitability, and every remaining predator knows the truth. No force within Tokyo is capable of stopping him. Jin-Woo has demonstrated that supremacy is defined not only by power or skill, but by the ability to enforce psychological dominance, manipulate the environment, and preempt every possible challenge. Fear, anticipation, and control have become extensions of his will. and resistance is not simply dangerous, it is irrelevant. The apex predator has claimed dominion over Tokyo, leaving a city forever altered, a hierarchy forever rewritten, and every observer forced to acknowledge a force that cannot be opposed. Kaneki reflects on what he has witnessed, a mix of awe, fear, and reluctant admiration. The Shadow Monarch has not only altered the balance of power, but has redefined what it means to survive in this world. Strength, cunning, and instinct remain important, but they are subordinate to recognition of inevitability, adaptation to dominance, and respect for an authority that operates beyond conventional limits. Tokyo is no longer a city of chaos. It is a domain where Sung Jin-Woo's presence dictates the flow of events, the behavior of predators, and the very nature of survival. The fall of the Ghoul Kings was only the beginning. The full extent of Jin-Woo's influence has transformed the city itself into an extension of his will. In the quiet aftermath, the city settles into a tense calm. Shadows move subtly, the wind carries a new weight, and every predator, human and hybrid, senses the presence that governs their reality. The world has proven incapable of stopping him, and any who might challenge him must first contend with the fact that they are playing by rules rewritten in real time by a predator whose control is absolute. The apex predator, the Shadow Monarch, reigns not by chaos, but by precision, inevitability, and psychological dominance, leaving Tokyo a city forever marked by his arrival. Before we close out, think about this. What would happen if another universe's strongest fighter entered this city? Could anyone possibly contest the Shadow Monarch's control? Or is this truly a world that cannot stop him? Drop your theories in the comments and let the debate begin. And if you enjoyed watching the unstoppable Sung Jin-Woo reshape the Tokyo Ghoul universe, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next multiverse collision. This has been another deep dive into the ultimate apex predator, and the story of a world that truly cannot stop him ends. For now.